Hello everyone, welcome to this PowerPoint. We are going to go over the principles of design and visual elements. In this PowerPoint, we'll go over a few vocabulary terms and discuss their concepts and visual components. Let's talk about composition. So composition is basically an arrangement, so arranging different elements in or the subject matter of an artwork. A successful composition is supposed to draw the eye across the entire art piece so that it's finally taken in and settles down on the main subject of artwork. Representational art. We're going to go over 3 different themes, appearances of art, for these next slides. So representational means anything that you find in the natural and real world. Just remember those concepts. Art resembles forms found in the natural/real world. The result is recognizable likeness. Recognizable likeness of the objects and forms. So anything that you see that looks like reality, if you can pick what that picture, what that art, painting, drawing, sculpture is, more than likely that's representational art. So in this case, we have some oranges and a mango. You and I can both see that they are oranges. We can even count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 over here is a mango. They're in this mesh container here. It's kind of like a cream color. So as you and I are describing how this looks, we understand that looks like reality. It's not distorted, it's not simplified. So this would be called representational art. Next. Another idea of representational art is something can be close up, but we still, again, can identify what it looks like. It's representing the real world. Now, in this picture we have here, this is a doorknob. We can even see the reflection of the photographer. Then we have blinds that are shooting out here on the right-hand side. So, again, we can pick apart what this looks like. You and I can see and come in agreement it is a doorknob. So it looks like recognizable likeness found in the real world. Another one on representational art. So you and I, right, as we look at this photograph, we can see that this is actually construction for a building, a home. We may not sure what it is or the details, but we understand we see the wood frame structures, we see the plastic here, we can see the interior space, and etc. So again, it represents the real world. Anything, again, that has a depiction of what you and I can come in agreement of what we see is representational art. Here's one more example. Now this is a pool setting. We have chairs, 1, 2, 3, 4. We have the spa here, a fence. We even have the clouds, sky, tree. So you and I can start, again, naming these objects one by one. If we can see what it is, that is representational art. Represents the real world, it resembles, represents reality. Let's now switch to abstract. Abstract can distort, these are our key words, exaggerates or simplifies our real world. Now you and I, we can see probably these are shoes and they are put together on their sides. However, they're introduced in a visual new way. We tend to not see shoes looking like this pattern. So a really strong line we have here, and that's another topic, but abstract. We're abstracting the way that we view these shoes because they are combined. They almost look like they could be one by the way that they are designed. Another abstract quality. So we understand here art that distorts, exaggerates, simplifies our world. We have buildings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about different colors. We can see the windows. Now we know this is a reflection from water. And we're familiar, water has that sort of reflection that distorts, simplifies, or exaggerates our natural world. So in this case, this would be called abstract art. Now I wanted to show this piece and I cropped it for a reason. We may not know it at the top of our thoughts when we first look at it, but it's actually petals from a flower. Now you may have known this immediately, you may not have. So this is now exaggerating, kind of distorting reality, simplifying. We're not seeing the entire flower. People could think of it as fabric, they might think of something different, but it makes you think twice what it is. So it's now changing reality slightly in its depiction by how close up it is. All right, let's go over now our last theme of art. And this is, again, different appearances of how art. We did representational, abstract, and now non-rep. Non-representational. Now, this is something that has no reference to our world as we see it. This is also called non-objective. So no reference. So meaning that we can't think about it and pinpoint it as something as real. It's not exaggerated or distorted and simplified. It is now no reference. Now, when we look at this up close, we see a violet color. We see different types of lines and values that are happening here. We can describe a lot of the line and visual elements, but we really don't know maybe what it is. Now, we do see this seam here, and this helps us, and this is actually a plastic ball. So a ball, B-A-L-L, but it's really neat how the artist decided to take a close-up. By the way, all these photos that I'm showing you are either student photos, majority of them, personal photos, or ones that I have researched through. Here's another representational. Again, contains no reference of our world that we know of. Now, this is really neat. The artist decided to take a close-up photograph of, actually, these are keys from a computer. So you can actually see the dust, which is pretty cool. You can see almost like this this red tint that's happening, but it's really silver. And again, this is a keyboard close-up. Let's move on to another word called focal point, aka emphasis. When you take a photograph or whenever you're creating an art piece, you want to think, what is the viewer going to look at? Where is your eye drawn to? This is great to share with people, family, friends. Just have them look at an image and see, what does your eye look at? So majority of us, probably our eye will go over here. So we have this pin here, and then over here is pretty plain, but has a lot of visual interest with the line qualities, the different wood textures, but majority will go over to this left-hand side. It has a different height to it, also a different type of texture, different color. So this is a compositional device emphasizing a certain area or object to draw attention to a piece and to encourage closer scrutiny of the work. So it's drawing our attention. Our eye is being pulled over here, and here's an arrow that I just created to this left-hand side. This is now our focal point. Focal points sometimes can be a little not as direct. So what's your eye attracted to in this photograph? We understand that we see a lot of pebbles, right? And they're infused with this foundation. When you have this, overall you might look at everything and you might say, you know, I don't see a focal point. My eye just goes through the entire piece. As you continue to look, you might start highlighting with your own eye certain colors that will pop out. Now for me, the dark colors are starting to pop out. And as I look at them, I can kind of see little patterns that flow through. Majority, though, are these three that my eye's attracted to. So as you continue on, you may see some textures, some colors. Just overall, what is your eye focusing on? What's drawing your attention to this? Now we might pick through, kind of ping pong by the eye. The eye will flow through maybe some darker patches. It just depends on how your eye is looking at everything. Next. Okay, rule of thirds. Rule of thirds is really important when you create an art piece, whether it's a sculpture, photograph, painting, a drawing, anything two-dimensional especially. So this is a guideline. The purposes of an image should be imagined as divided into 9 equal parts, 2 equally spaced horizontal and 2 equally spaced vertical. That important compositional element should be placed alongside their lines and their intersections. This is really interesting. I really recommend when you watch a movie, a sitcom, when you look at a greeting card, when you look at photographs, when you look at art pieces, paintings, drawings, a large majority of artists will create the rule of thirds. And you may be doing it already with your own photographs that you take and may not even be realizing it. So I'm going to go ahead and divide my picture into 9 equal parts. I have 1, 2, 3, so I divide it into 3s. Then I go ahead and divide the horizontal part. And now this is called the rule of thirds. Now the idea is that we don't want to put anything in the dead center. That is called a bullseye, and that becomes not as visual interesting. Think about a passport photo or driver's license where your eye is in the dead center from your face. It's not as interesting. Now what's really neat with this photographer is they put elements that are important on the sides, and that is great. So we have these different types of plant life, all containing on these other component parts. Now I'm going to circle these intersecting lines. This typically is where you put a focal point. So you put it on the side because it just becomes a little more visually interesting. Let's look at another one. Now I'm going to play around with this concept for a moment. If you're not sure your art piece is using the rule of thirds, think about your focal point. This is really the key, everyone. Where is your focal point? If your focal point is in the dead center, then it's not using the rule of thirds. That's okay. You don't have to use the rule of thirds in every piece you make. Just be aware of what you are doing and why you're doing it. Let's go ahead and divide our image up like we did with the other one. And if you're not sure, again, it's nice to divide your image and try it out just visually. Okay, so I divided my image up. I have the different rows and the different columns. Now let's see, what is our focal point? Well, we probably already guessed this. It's the middle, right? Really neat photograph. But we really look at this black hollow shape here, surrounded by this nice kind of burnt orange color. So this is our focal point. And so in this case, we are not using the rule of thirds because we don't have the center focal point off in any of these 4 corners. If the photographer would have moved their camera slightly off to one of these sides, that would have been a different story. But in this case, we are looking right in the middle. So again, we are not using the rule of thirds in this one. Let's go now to directional force, everyone. So directional force is also very similar to implied line. Implied line. What creates a line? What creates a path for your eye to follow? That's very important. And you might have to step back and look at shape, line, color, texture to help flow the eye through the piece. Directional force, a path the eye will follow through the composition. Now here's just some information. Look over the entire picture and see if are there shapes or patterns that lead your eye somewhere. The line can be horizontal, vertical, diagonal, circular, etc. Now let's go ahead and look at our other vocabulary terms. This would be representational art because it looks like reality, right? We understand this is a rock, this is some concrete, and then this is some life over here of rocks and different types of forms of the ground. Now let's go ahead and think about our focal point. Probably this little rock, right, is our focal point. Let's look at rule of thirds. If we divide it into 9 equal parts, right, this little rock is not in the dead center, so we are using the rule of thirds in this piece. Now let's talk about directional force. Now because we have this strong diagonal line, we are definitely having this sort of relationship with the eye going back and forth. Also, the little tiny shadow creates this line as well. Now in the back we have line happening too. This pebble is pretty circular. You could always say the line might be going up, but more than likely it's really these strong concrete lines from the cement doing this, as well as the background. So there is strong directional force going diagonal and horizontally. Let's look at diagonal force in this one. So this is a wheel, and we can tell that it has an edge to it, really interesting diagonal angle. Our focal point, you could talk about many different ways. It could be here, it could be this large area on the right hand side, it could be the eye pulling through. More than likely though, let's go back to directional force, and our eye is being pulled down more than likely, right? We're going to these different types of line here, and maybe the front part our eye goes to as well. So directional force has any sort of line, shape, texture, color, something that's pulling the eye. So the eye is being pulled down to this lower left-hand side. The eye also